and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Star Trek Lower Decks Season 3, Episode 9, Trusted Sources. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Lower Decks. So I have to start with the spoiler warning for Lower Decks up to Season 3, Episode 9, if you have not seen up to this point. You will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. So, episodes 8, 9, and 10 of Lower Decks tend to have a reputation of being good, the better episodes. It was that way, I believe, in Season 1. And most people think Season 2, but not me. But here's the thing. So, usually when I record my reviews for Lower Decks, I purposely do not watch any other reviews or read any other reviews or opinions or thoughts on the episode, so I can give my opinion affected, unburdened by what other people had said. But for this episode, I intentionally watched and read a whole bunch of reviews because I wanted to hear what other people were saying about this episode before I recorded my review. Because here's the thing. Last year, Season 2's Episode 9, I believe, was called Wedge Douche. I did the same thing. I didn't read or watch any videos. I gave my unfettered opinion just based off the episode, and it was kind of underwhelming, and I was kind of disappointed, and I thought it was just an average episode. And then I went and read all the reviews, and everyone was raving about it and loving about it, and to this day people were calling it one of the best episodes of Modern Trek and Lower Decks easily, but I still think it's just okay. I still think it was average. And so, because this is an episode 9, I thought I might experience the same thing because I was also underwhelmed by this episode. So I thought maybe this was a repeat of last year. So that's why I intentionally went out and watched and read all these reviews. However, I found it's not a repeat of last year, that most people are also underwhelmed. So this time I'm not the weird oddball contrarian. This time pretty much everyone is on the same page. Now I have seen some reviews that like it slightly more than me and some reviews that like it slightly less than me, but we're pretty much on par, whereas opposed to the Wedge Douche thing, which spoilers for my top 10 most overrated episodes of Star Trek video. That's a video that's coming out in a couple of weeks. It's on it because I think it's incredibly overrated, because it just is repeating the same joke over and over again, and it's a joke I never found funny to begin with. And yeah, I get that these are different versions of our main characters but on Klingon Vulcan ships. I get it. Don't really care. But anyway, not that I hated that episode. I thought it was okay. So this episode, getting into this one, I liked it a lot for the first half. I think it was good and strong the first half, but the second half is when it went downhill and kind of unraveled for me. Now, I will say there were some funny moments in this episode, particularly like the telegraph thing where, Freeman's talking to Ransom. It's like, everything has to be perfect for the reporter coming here. We have to make sure we're on their best behavior. And predictably, Mariner comes by, like, doing something silly, which I knew would happen, but it was still hilarious. It was still funny. She's, like, completely covered in blueberries and leaving trails of blueberries everywhere. I thought that was hilarious. And there were a few other funny moments in this episode as well that I can't recall off the top of my head. Alright, this is Mark, editing Mark, interjecting here because I did remember another really funny moment that I thought was worth mentioning. That's with the bird counselor, I believe his name is McMimo, when he takes over the ship and they have him the kind. It's like, I actually have the chair, and he calls, like, call Mima, and he's talking to his mother, and Freeman comes in and he's like, Mom, I told you not to call me. Like, that moment was hilarious and I thought worth mentioning. But I wouldn't call it, like, one of the funniest episodes. I think it was, the amount of funny it was good. It was like what a good episode of Lower Decks, not as opposed to a bad one, which is kind of under funny. is what it would usually do, is what I expect from Lower Decks. I wouldn't call it one of them funny or laugh out loud, die laughing episodes like I Excretus or something like that, or the Crisis Point. But it was the kind of funny that I expect from Lower Decks. So it didn't underwhelm in that regard, but it didn't completely outshine. I think it was kind of average on that, which is good. But here's the thing about the episode itself seemed to focus more on the senior officers, and that's something I wasn't that into, and I think it wasn't as interesting. Alright, so the concept of this episode I thought was really fascinating. It was the swing by missions where they would a planet that one of our main starships had gone to previously had just stopped by and then fucked off and never heard of again. They're actually going to swing by and see how are they actually doing after that encounter with the Starfleet ship, which I think is a cool concept, and I hope they keep this up. I hope they continue to revisit planets that were one-offs in the original series, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and I can't do Voyager because of the Delta Quadrant, but TNG, if they swing by and revisit them. I was actually hoping that Prodigy would do the Voyager swing by, but that's clearly not keeping with canon at all, and I've accepted that. But anyway, the way they treat space travel is just nuts. I'm not even going to talk about that here. So, but I do like how we get a touch up on the episode Symbiosis, which is actually one of my favorite episodes of Season 1 of TNG, which, Season 1 of TNG sucks, so being a good episode or one of the best of that season is not a high bar, not a high feat, but I think to me it stands out amongst all the garbage that's in Season 1 as one of the ones I actually like. And so I think it's particularly interesting that they go to this planet and they find that everyone's like, oh, we're all good now, we're good. I actually love that because it's been a discourse online. A lot of people have the Prime Directive has been very controversial in recent years, the past decade. In particular, I've heard a lot of people slam it, and particularly its use in Star Trek. And Symbiosis is one of the episodes that they in particular like to criticize and think that Picard absolutely did the wrong thing, and he was in the wrong, and he was being too rigid and strict about the Prime Directive, which is a stance that I never really agreed with. So I love that it's canon now that Picard did the right thing. In your face! I mean, as much as you take Lower Decks seriously, I'm sure people disagree. Will just dismiss Lower Decks as a silly comedy, which is fine, whatever. But yeah, I like the fact that so many people were like, oh my god, Picard just left those people to suffer and die and didn't help us support them, and they're all going to die and their planet's going to completely be destroyed. And oh my god. And now we say that actually no, they're actually much better for it, and they think it was a good thing, and they're all healthy now. I love that. Next thing the Cerritos need to do, they need to visit that planet in the Enterprise episode, Dear Doctor, where people were trying to say that Phlox and Archer committed genocide, which is bullshit because genocide, you have to do something. They literally did nothing, so that doing nothing is not genocide. You may think it's wrong, you may think it's immoral, but beside the point, I want them to visit that planet and show that species that people were assuming got genocide actually survived, because they're assuming that they're going to die from this plague, which you don't know they're going to die from the plague, because just because Phlox didn't give them the cure doesn't mean that they didn't find the cure somewhere else. So I want the Cerritos to revisit that planet and be like, oh, we'll see how these people are doing after all these centuries, and find that those species in fact survived and are living in peace with the other species. So that would be the even better in your face thing, so people wouldn't be able to do this genocide bullshit anymore. But anyway, that's another topic. But God, I would love to see that. But yeah, I was love the symbiosis thing, where they, so now people are like, oh, Picard left those people to die and suffer. Actually, they turn into health nuts and they're fine. And that's kind of like, I feel like that's based off of real life, that a lot of recovering addicts do turn to, like, get obsessed with being healthy and exercise and stuff like that, which is, a very good thing. But I feel like they were kind of basing it off of that, because there was a whole planet of recovering addicts who had their, drugs stripped away, so they were forced to give up this drug against their will. And how eventually, like, they had the mirror, which I love, the mirror, where it showed the Enterprise coming, taking all the drugs away, and then chaos and everyone going crazy and mad, and then there was peace after that, because once they recovered and got through the hard part, which is a lot of what coming off of drug addiction is. It is horrible. It's withdrawals. It's terrible. It's a long process, but once you get through to the other side, and the process keeps continuing the rest of your life, obviously, but once you get clear to a more healthy state of mind, you're a much better person for it. And so I love that is the natural conclusion. That's the conclusion I would have drawn from the episode Symbiosis. And that maybe Picard was right. Maybe if he tried to stay and help them, they would have just made things worse, and that the Prime Directive exists for a reason. I'm pro Prime Directive. No, well, not always, but anyway, there are some examples where I agree with the anti-Prime Directive crowd, particularly the episode Homeward. That there was no excuse to just leave the people to die. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So, so what I was saying. So, so I like that concept, but I kind of wish there was more. I think the way that they treated Freeman when she beamed down, I was like, oh, there's nothing to do, we're fine, we don't need your help, we're all good, thanks, and just go off there and run. I mean, it's a comedy show, and I take it with the suspense and disbelief, but surely there'd be something they need from Starfleet, at least, like, keep up, like, cordial relations or whatever, and keep in contact, even if they don't need, like, dire aid or anything. It seems like that was just, like, a plot point, which, again, I give some lenience to, because it is a comedy show, but I do wish that they would have done more. Now, but then they were like, and it was just a plot point for Freeman to look bad in front of the reporter, and well, I'll get to the reporter. And so then they go to Brekka, which is the other planet. Actually, no. Let me pause on this. Let me stay with the first half of the episode. So let me talk about the reporter. This immediately turned me off, because, and whenever Star Trek, and it's always modern Star Trek, makes references to reporters, and even like you saw a few reporters in Generations, and Jake Sisko wanted to be, reporter, journalist. But whenever they touch on that, especially like in the scenes of Lower Decks when they showed the FNN before, since it was brief scenes, I was able to overlook it. But the concept of having a news media that functions effectively the same way our news media does now in the 24th century, which is supposed to be a, post-Scarcity utopia, it makes zero sense to me. I think the news media as it exists currently is a very, very poor way to disseminate information to the masses, and I would assume in the 24th century they would come up with a much better way to, less bias, less influenced by money, to disseminate information. And so I don't buy that any news media that exists exactly how it exists now would be in the Star Trek utopia. I reject that outright. And this was even more true in the episode Picard, where they had the reporter grill him. That was so telegraphed and cliched. Like, that was the thing I hated the most about that pilot episode of Picard. And I just really didn't buy it. And so I'm able to just dismiss it and be like, whatever, when it's just features of loose cameo in Lower Decks. Like, it's just a comedy show and it's just a way to get information across, fine. But focusing on that and making that the main point of the episode, turn off for me. I absolutely, I just bothered me a lot. I just didn't really buy it. And plus it makes it cliche, regardless of how I feel of the news media in the 24th century utopia, just forgetting about all those things, wiping those clean. It's just a cliche in television. It remind me of like episodes of like Babylon 5, Battlestar Galactica, Stargate SG-1. I think maybe even more shows that had an episode where it's done like from the news media style, where it's all like you see from their perspective when they're interviewing all of our main characters. I fucking hated that format. And I remember I was like really dreading The Expanse would do the same thing, because I knew from reading the books that in season 3 there was a couple of journalists and documentary makers who came on board the Rocinante, but thankfully The Expanse avoided that trope, and I was so thankful for that. But, and to be fair, Lower Decks didn't do that trope either, which would have been even much worse. But they skirted it. They did have like a lot of interviews and make the main focus. It's kind of like The Expanse also skirted it. But here, as I said, I'm less forgiving because it's Star Trek, and I just don't like that cliche. I think it's a poor cliche to base your episode based off of a reporter out to get you, and of course it ends up being a gotcha get you thing, which is the overall cliche, the one I really hated in Picard. So this is a huge negative on the episode for me. Now, so when I was talking before about how I felt like the episode fell apart in the second half, because now I'll get into the Brekka stuff, because this is when the episode starts to come undone for me. When they go to Brekka, which I was very interested to see. I was interested to see how they would portray, since the people who are addicted are all well and good and healthy and going on fun runs all the time, how they would portray the drug addicts whose entire industry was based on selling these drugs to the other planet. So without that industry, would their planet collapse, or would they find a way to survive and become better for it, just like the other ones, the Onarians did? But they kind of sidestep the issue and don't address it at all. Instead, focus on this Breen attack, where the Breen invaded their world. Why did the Breen invade their world? What resources could they possibly need? Because the whole point of this society is that they didn't have any valuable resources other than this drug, which is why they were selling it to this other society, unless the Breen wanted the drug. Maybe they're saying that they're pirates and end up selling the drug on the black market. I doubt it. But regardless, like, why the Breen there? And by having the Breen there and focusing on the Breen, as I said, it sidesteps the issues. It evades the question. It doesn't answer it the same way the other one did. And that bothered me. And also, the whole sequence with the Breen seemed to have come out of nowhere and go boom, 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 and happen way too fast. It was like, oh, the Breen are here. Oh, the Breen are attacking. Oh, the Breen are attacking the ship. Oh, no, the Cerritos is getting destroyed. Obviously, another ship's going to come out of nowhere and save them. It was the most obvious thing ever. They did this in the season 1 finale. They've did it before. They even made fun of it in the Crisis Point episode last week. So obviously, a ship was going to come out of nowhere and save them. And sure enough, it does, and it turns out to be this, unmanned new Texas-class ship, which I'm not impressed with that idea. I don't think it's very interesting storytelling. And more to the point, for this episode, it came out of nowhere, and it seemed really disconnected. So this whole second half seemed extremely rushed, and like boom, 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 and to come out of nowhere. So I didn't appreciate that. Now, the Mariner stuff. Yeah, there is a disconnect, and this is something I actually picked up on watching these other reviews. Picked this up for me, that the way Mariner was behaving, and obviously, I feel this way now that I think back. I kind of missed it the first time I watched it, but the way Mariner was behaving in the first half of the episode is like, I'm going to reveal the truth to the reporter. I'm going to talk to the reporter. Ha 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 ha. And it's really setting it up for her to just splurt out the exact truth. Which, warts and all the negative stuff about the Cerritos. So it's completely inconsistent to have her, that she went, oh, my mom's the best captain ever and the crew is great. That these two halves don't connect. It's an obvious fake out. It's a contrived fake out, which I do have more leniency for in a comedy show, but then it was played for more dramatic rather than comedic effect, so not so lenient on it. I think it doesn't make any sense. And to have the way that the crew really shunned her and turned her back, and even her girlfriend refused to talk to her, and everyone was like, fucking, and her mother was like, don't even talk to Ensign Mariner. That was OTT. Even for a comedy show, because as I said, it wasn't done for comedy, it was done for drama. And the whole concept of Starbase 80 and the people who were total morons, oh, I got the sandwich here. I did not find it the least bit funny. I was completely stone-faced in all the Starbase 80 jokes. I don't give a shit. That's not funny to me at all. And so, as predicted, it was obvious they were setting up for this early in the season. Mariner runs off with the archaeology chick. Which is interesting. I'm open to that, and I'm open to see how they bring her back in the show, because obviously they will, but how they're going to do that. And to be fair, I do like the dynamic, because the dynamic before was Mariner kept fucking up and doing this shit to alienate her mother. But now it's her mother who fucked up, and now she has to grovel to Mariner. So I do like that dynamic. I think that's an interesting dynamic, and that's going to be an interesting thing to play with going forward. I think its execution was not done very well, though. I think they could have done a better job. It was a bit too contrived, especially the way that the reporter was talking to all the other people were the ones who said all the bad shit about the Cerritos, and the Mariner actually said really great stuff. I don't know. It was just contrived. It was too contrived for me. Just saying. So, my rating for was this something sources, reliable source, trusted sources. My rating for trusted sources out of 10, I'm going to give it a 7. Very good. To be honest, I was kind of torn between a 6 and a 7 for this episode. If I did 0.5s, I'd probably give it 6.5, but I don't. So I think I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt and push it up to a 7 rather than a 6, because as I said, there were a lot of jokes. The whole blueberry thing, and Rutherford ripping his shirt off and going, "Stun me!" I gotta admit, that was funny too. This is the over-the-top way that they played it, and I love revisiting Symbiosis. As I said, an episode I actually really like, and I love that they said that Picard did the right thing and they were actually fine. I love that so much. But then, yes, as I said, the whole news media aspect to it, I did not like, and the whole second half having to deal with the Breen attack and the Texas class and then Mariner getting ostracized, all that stuff did not work for me. But enough of the episode did, which pushed it up for a 7 to me. So anyway, that is it for my review of Trusted Sources. Please be sure to check out my channel as I finish covering Lower Decks, the finale next week. And I cover many other shows like House of the Dragon and all sorts of other Star Trek on my channel. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all that. Thanks a lot for watching.